Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are really getting into the tactical side of things, heading onto the virtual pitch for, well, what we hope is a masterclass in eFootball strategy. We're doing a deep dive specifically into successful attacking buildup and maybe the most crucial bit for playing at a high level, tempo control. So if you've ever felt, rushed in a match, maybe panicked under pressure, and just ended up hoofing the ball long, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. How do we move past that feeling, that anxiety, and find the real path to controlled dominance, being able to dictate the game's rhythm, not just reacting?
Yeah, and what's really interesting when you look into it is how much of the advice feels backward at first. We think winning means speed, right? But the sources we looked at, they're clear. The foundation of a really strong attack, it actually has very little to do with pure speed, especially early on. The core idea really is patience. It's about total composure and being able to read what your opponent is doing, almost like seeing their game plan laid out.
Right, and that really brings up the central paradox, doesn't it? We're talking about slow buildup,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely not slow football. That initial, maybe slower pace, that's actually the tool for control. We're not moving slowly, we're moving deliberately.
Exactly. Think of it like a tactical investment. You're investing these passes.
Mm-hmm.
Now some might look a bit sideways, maybe even boring, but you're doing it specifically to create those explosive game-winning gaps later on. Controlled dominance is really about making the opponent chase shadows, chase the ball, until their defensive structure just breaks.
Okay, so if control really starts with being patient, where does the attack actually begin on the pitch? I mean, we can't just launch it and hope, right? Where's the starting block?
No, absolutely not. That's the opposite of control. The mandatory starting point, it has to be right back with your goalkeeper. You're looking for short passes, safe passes, specifically aiming for your two center backs, your CBs. They're the foundation. And the initial structure, it needs to stay central. The sources are really, really clear on this. Don't force those early passes out wide to your fullbacks unless the middle is just completely jammed. Keeping it central gives you balance. It keeps your options open on both sides of the pitch, means you can switch the play much easier later.
Okay, but here's where it gets a bit more involved, right? Because the CBs aren't just like passing it back and forth. Their job isn't passive. They're doing something active, something the source is called baiting.
That's exactly it, baiting. The CBs use simple passes, maybe little 1-2s between themselves, maybe involving the keeper, sometimes shifting slightly wide. And they're doing this specifically to draw the other team's forwards out, to make them commit.
Ah, okay.
They're basically testing the press. How far are those attackers willing to come? How much space will they leave behind?
So you're not just waiting for them to press, you're kind of dangling the bait, making the ball look just reachable enough to tempt them forward.
Precisely. You're manipulating their positioning. You want those forwards to feel like they have to close your CBs down. The second they overcommit, well, the trap is sprung.
Okay, let's talk about that moment, because that's where I know I do this. The panic can set in. The opponent presses hard, you feel boxed in, and that urge to just clear it long takes over. How do we keep that controlled dominance when we're facing that kind of high press?
Well, the panic usually comes from feeling like you have no options, right? Like you're trapped. The key strategy here, it's a bit counterintuitive maybe, but it relies on using the pitch geometry. It's the quick switch of play. If your opponent pushes loads of players to press, say, your left CB, what does that mean?
It means the other side is open.
Exactly. The other side of the pitch suddenly has space. But the solution isn't usually a risky long ball across. Often, it's about dropping the ball quickly back to your defensive midfielder, your DMF, or maybe even the keeper, and then immediately switching it across to the other CB, the one who now has breathing room.
Yeah.
That single, sharp, horizontal pass. It often just completely kills their pressing shape because all the players they committed are now way out of position.
Wow, okay. That's huge. Just one quick pass can completely undo their high energy press. But to make that switch work and just generally navigate the pressure, we really need to focus on probably the most important player in this whole system, the heart of the buildup, the DMF.
Absolutely, the linchpin. The DMF is like the central switchboard for everything. Their job is crystal clear, dictate the tempo, dictate the direction of the attack. When they get the ball, especially under pressure, there's no time for hesitation. They have to scan, see the space, turn their body towards that open space away from the defender, and then use quick, often one-touch passes to just bypass that first line of pressure.
And this feels like where we nail down that golden rule of tempo control you mentioned. When you're under pressure, the escape hatch is often that short, sharp 1-2 pass.
Yeah.
Because, and this is fundamental, right? The ball has to move faster than the players chasing it.
Spot on. If you're struggling with that idea,
Yeah.
think of the 1-2 not just as a pass, but almost like a mini teleport for the ball. Your player might feel slow under pressure,
Yeah.
but the pass itself is instant. You're using that speed, the speed of the ball, to beat the physical pressure.
Yeah.
It's about precision, composure, not necessarily raw speed from the player.
Okay, that covers the high press really well. We've got control starting from the back using the DMF. Now, let's shift gears a bit. What about a different challenge? The mid block. This is where the opponent sits a bit deeper, maybe packs the midfield really narrow, and basically just dares you to try and break them down. If the quick switch was key against the press, what's our main weapon here?
Patience again. But it's a different kind of patience. It's more probing. The big tactical mistake you absolutely have to avoid here, and yeah, no, I make this mistake too sometimes, is trying to force vertical passes through the middle when it's crowded.
Right, you see a tiny gap and just try to thread it through.
Exactly. And it gets cut out 9 times out of 10. If you see 3-4 bodies packed in that central channel between your DMF and your forwards, just stop.
Yeah.
Going vertical isn't the answer yet. The answer is to systematically pull them apart using what the sources call stretching. You need to use the width of the pitch. Your CBs might move a little wider, occupy more space. Your fullbacks absolutely must get involved, offering wide options. And you just recycle the ball, side to side, left CB to DMF to right CB to right fullback, back to the middle, constantly moving it horizontally.
Okay, but doesn't that feel, well, a bit boring sometimes? As a player, passing left, right, left again, you can feel like you're not really going anywhere. What's the actual point, beyond just keeping the ball?
That's a fair point. It can feel slow. But the tactical purpose is huge. It's about creating fatigue, yes, but more importantly, creating indecision in the defense. Every time you move the ball side to side, their midfield and defense have to shift. They have to adjust. You're stretching their block horizontally. And eventually, if you keep doing it patiently, someone makes a mistake, someone gets pulled slightly out of position, you're essentially just waiting, probing, waiting for one specific visual cue.
Okay, and what is that cue? What are we looking for before we suddenly change gears and attack?
You're watching their central midfielders mainly, the guys clogging up the middle. You're waiting for that moment when one of them gets dragged too far wide.
Yeah.
Maybe they follow your fullback too eagerly or they overreact to a shift. And that movement, even if it's small, it creates a temporary gap. A channel opens up, usually vertically or diagonally, right through the center of their block, a space that just wasn't there 5 seconds before. That is the trigger.
Ah, okay. So the sideways passing isn't pointless. It's actively creating the condition for the attack.
Precisely. The instant you spot that movement, that little crack appearing in their defensive wall, that's when the tempo changes. Instantly. From maybe a 2 out of 10 right up to 10. And you hit that gap hard and fast. A quick vertical pass, maybe a diagonal ball into a forward or midfielder who's drifted into that new space. You penetrate that zone that was locked down just moments before.
Okay, let's layer on something maybe a bit more advanced now. Thinking about really manipulating the opponent. Decoys, smart player movement, rotation. We talked about the DMF dictating tempo, but how can they actively create the space needed for that sudden acceleration?
Right. This is where the DMF can evolve from just being a pivot to being actual bait. You can use them intentionally as a decoy. Maybe they drift slightly wider or make a dummy run forward. If they can pull an opposing midfielder towards them, even for a second, that creates space either behind where that midfielder was or maybe just to the side of them.
So the DMF draws someone out.
Exactly. And while the DMF is doing that, acting as the decoy, that's the signal for your other midfielders, your CMX usually, to get moving. The CMX shouldn't just be standing still waiting. They need to be constantly rotating, scanning, searching for those little pockets of space. Specifically, the space between the opponent's defensive line and their midfield line. That's the gold dust area.
That rotation sounds key. If the opponent's just sitting there in, say, a rigid 4-4-2 shape, how does CMS make sure they're actually finding useful space, not just hiding behind the opponent's midfielders? Should they drop deep sometimes, go wide?
It really depends on where the ball is and where the pressure is. It's about intelligent movement. If the ball's out wide with your fullback, maybe one CMF makes themselves available in the half space, that channel between the opponent's winger and central midfielder, ready for a pass that cuts inside. If the ball is more central, maybe one CMF drops a little deeper, almost next to the DMF, creating an overload, while the other CMF pushes a bit higher, looking to exploit any gap between the lines. It's this constant fluid movement, this intelligent rotation. It keeps a static defense guessing. It pulls them out of their comfortable shape.
This really feels like the payoff, doesn't it? We've gone from that controlled, patient buildup at the back through midfield, and now, through the smart work of the DMF as a pivot or decoy and the CMS rotating, you've finally manufactured that space. Then the tempo explodes.
That's the moment.
And the final piece is executing that attack. Quick 1-2s to get past the last man, maybe a direct through ball to a forward making a run, or perhaps slipping it wide to a winger who's now suddenly one-on-one because the defense got stretched so thin. It connects back beautifully. Every calm pass you made earlier built the rhythm. Every sideways recycle weakened their shape bit by bit. That whole systematic process, that's what builds the confidence, right? That's how you get to mastery.
Yeah, and if you think about the bigger journey here, becoming really elite at eFootball, or any complex skill, really, it isn't quick. Learning to dictate tempo like this is genuinely difficult at first. The game feels fast, the pressure's always on. But what you're doing through practice is training your tactical eye, your pattern recognition. Over time, you start to develop this almost subconscious feel for the game's rhythm. You just know when you need to slow it down, consolidate, keep the ball. And then you recognize that trigger moment, that tiny gap, and you know instinctively, right now is the time to accelerate, to exploit the space you've patiently created. Being able to manipulate the tempo like that, shifting gears instantly, that's really the hallmark of elite build-up play.
So the final takeaway for you listening has to be, don't chase the game. When the opponent presses you hard, when the buildup feels agonizingly slow, try to resist that panic button. Give yourself that little bit of leverage by focusing on composure, on the shape, on the geometry of the pitch. The goal isn't to frantically chase the match, forcing low percentage chances. It's about making the match move for you.
And maybe just a final thought to chew on, something that goes beyond the game itself. If patience and recycling options and looking for the right opening is the key to building a successful attack in eFootball, where else in your life, maybe in your work, maybe on a long-term project, are you instinctively trying to rush straight forward, trying to force a vertical solution, or maybe slowing down, circulating your options, assessing the situation properly? Maybe that would actually give you controlled dominance and open up a much better path forward in the long run. The geometry of success. Sometimes it really does mean taking a step back or sideways before you can truly move ahead. Something to think about.